Hello and welcome to or welcome back to Colonial Outcasts, the anti-imperialist podcast that your uncle will hate. We kind of got away from that slogan because you, the audience, have informed us that you have some enlightened uncles, or you are an enlightened uncle. But hot damn, we're 3 days into the new presidency and the bootlickers are already out in force. After 15 months of being gaslit about a genocide happening in Palestine, we're now being gaslit that, Elon Musk, oligarch extraordinaire, didn't send a particularly belligerent Sig Heil during the inauguration. So, first of all, I'm your host, Greg Stoker. Mark is sick today, but we've got Travis here returning after a while for an old segment, Operational Breakdown, where we'll be looking at Israel's new Operation Iron Wall that is now unfolding in the West Bank. So if you're new to this channel, I'm a former U.S. Army Ranger, and Travis was a field-grade West Point artillery officer who once upon a time ran a mechanized infantry platoon. Back in the day, we're both combat veterans who fought in illegal wars, and we are now activists, among other things. Anyways, this will be more of a military-oriented episode in support of the cause for Palestinian liberation. But first, I wanted to get your thoughts, Travis, on the fascists, not talking about the Israeli government yet, but Elon Musk.
Big surprise that that all the seats behind the president at the inauguration are billionaires. It's just like a who's who among the oligarchy. Not huge, no huge shocker there. His egregious behavior also not shocking. If you followed Elon for any manner of time, you know that he's essentially the richest incel in history and behaves like it. So yeah, no surprise here for me. But
right, I mean the inauguration, the seating assignments of the inauguration were startling, because like if you've ever been to a function or planned an event, like a lot of thought and time goes into seating arrangements, and then you had all these tech oligarchs, these broligarchs, right behind the president, and behind them were elected officials. But there was this whole like class of billionaires, and the CEO of Google was there too, all stacked in front of the camera. And then behind Hillary Clinton was Miriam Adelson, the Zionist settler extraordinaire, mob boss, and Mossad asset, who gave Trump $100 million. And her one issue is West Bank is ours, it's Israel's. We're going to turn it into Judea and Samaria, and everyone can go F themselves.
Yeah, that seating chart was really a who's who of like techno-feudalists, right-wing populist or alt-right populists, and neoliberals, right? That's who was sitting up there. So this is an anarchist podcast. We won't go too far down that road, but
yeah, no, we're gonna focus mostly on this Operation Iron Wall. But I was just on the George Galloway show, and I kind of opened up my yesterday, and I kind of opened up my like interview with kind of like a quip. I was like, he's like, "How's it going there in America?" I was essentially like, "Oh, we're 2 days into a presidency, and we already have people like defending a Nazi salute." And he's like, "Well, you don't actually think Elon Musk is a Nazi?" I was just kind of saying, essentially, like, no. I mean, he platforms white replacement theory, union busts, hates workers' unions.
South African son of an apartheid emerald fortune. Yeah, this is really wild.
Also, he says that the AFD party, the Alternative for Deutschland, this far right populist party that's kind of born out of the ashes of the Nazi ideology, he says that's the only hope for Germany. So like, look, I wouldn't call him a Nazi. I would call him basically like a white supremacist anarcho-capitalist, which is basically a fascist who bitches about having to pay taxes.
yeah, agree. I mean, this shouldn't be shocking to anybody who has a history book, right? Like, who were the biggest fans of the early baby burgeoning Nazi party in the U.S., right? It was industrialists.
Yeah,
your Henry Fords and your so and so's. That's who were early fans of these movements, and he's an iteration of that.
Yeah, because was it Robert Reich? I forget. Like, some economists were saying we're in the second Gilded Age, and if you're not familiar with American history, because I know we have a lot of overseas audiences, well, an oligarchy has existed in America before. It was late 1800s into like the early 1900s, like 1904, 1905. And it was, yes, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Fords, like, who weaponized all of this massive wealth to control our democracy. Or, I mean, if you believe that we've ever had a democracy, that's up to debate, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, Theodore Roosevelt called them, quote, the malefactors of great wealth. And, they did, and that's where a lot of this legislation, his presidency and his fifth cousin, FDR, put in a lot of legislation to like antitrust laws, trust busting, high tax rates for the uber rich. And that kind of helped throughout the 60s, 70s. And over the past few decades, there has been a concerted effort, an assault on all those things. And now I think since like 2000, we've been in the second Gilded Age, and that's what we're looking at right now.
I mean, I think most people would peg the real downturn and return to this kind of the BS. I don't know. A lot of us would put it somewhere around Reagan. I think that's probably one of the favorite markers, but there's some parts of it that happened even before that.
Yeah, and I think the real nail in the coffin,
the tax rates that you're talking about being suddenly drastically reduced, which now you talk about those tax rates today, and people act like you're insane, and it's like, no, that was the tax rate up until like the 1950s and 60s on people that were that rich. Like, it was that high.
And there's been a lot of revisionist history, because like trickle down economics is apparently still a viable, system, like still a viable philosophy. Sorry, I grew up around rich people. They don't spend their money. No. Nothing's trickling down.
No, they don't start companies with their own money. They don't spend their own money. That's not how it works. Rich dudes don't spend their own money to get things done.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're talking about this in the context of Palestine because, like, if the violence and the occupation is inevitably going to end, if you study any sort of post-colonial history, it generally happens in conjunction with a resistance movement and unrest inside the imperial core, the citizens of the empire. So next 4 years are going to be crazy. I just wanted to play this one clip about Elon, because I found it. It's his father talking about why they named him Elon.
God, man, if you thought Elon was a weird incel, get ready for his dad.
Oh yeah. Second, like, Elon posts about all these grooming gangs, like the Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK. It's like, dude, your dad literally has 2 kids with his stepdaughter,
with his own kid.
Yeah. Anyways, so like, I get it, but like, here's where the name Elon comes from.
We go back to my children's names. Elon, when I was a child, we used to build rockets, and we used to read the books of Herman Oberth.
Yeah. Herman Oberth supported the Nazi Germany's war effort and received the War Merit Cross in 1943.
And Werner von Braun.
Who's that?
Werner von Braun.
I'm joking. Obviously, I know who Werner von Braun is.
Okay, yeah. Operation Paperclip. We post the head, like, Nazi rocket scientist. That's Werner von Braun. But yeah,
von Braun's book, I think it was his, or it could have been Oberth's book, spoke about that the head of the Mars colony would be called the Elon. When May and I got married, I was quite amazed to discover.
And May refers to Elon Musk's mother, whose parents moved to South Africa because they were literally Nazis, and Canada was too multicultural for them.
That her father's grandfather or something had been called Elon, which was really reminded me of the stories that we had. And so I thought, well, yes, I'd like that name for Elon.
Okay, look, I just wanted to say I'm done being gaslit about that.
I really like that. I really like that side by side view, because when you put him next to them doing it, it's like, are you still going to try to pretend that that's not what just happened? Yeah.
And if you just listen to the audio, at the end of the clip, it was Elon doing the Sig Heil in front of MAGA world. In spliced in with an actual neo-Nazi doing the same thing. A bunch of neo-Nazis do like he stuck perfect angle, starting at the chest, going out like upside down frown, just really relishing it. And again, I don't want to keep focusing on this, but like the road to fascism is paved by people telling you to stop overreacting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Normalization of this wild ass behavior.
No, he's autistic. Yeah, maybe he's also Auschwitzistic. So, anyways, guys, let's now that we've kind of like primed it with what's going on in the deep dark belly of the beast, the heart of empire, Washington D.C., Coruscant under the rule of Emperor Palpatine. We just saw the inauguration of the Imperial Court happen, stocked full of billionaires, Zionists, and the Republicans try to pretend like they're not a party of war, but they are. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So like, let's check in with what is actually happening in Palestine, and this is Al Jazeera reporting. Of course, we all know that Al Jazeera's problematic in some ways, but this is a good one. So this is a clip from earlier today, it being January 23rd.
In Jenin refugee camp in the northern part of the occupied West Bank, the Israeli military is detaining more people while tanks and bulldozers roll in, destroying roads and infrastructure. The Israeli military says it's carrying out a counter-terrorism operation. It follows a weeks-long operation by Palestinian Authority forces in the refugee camp.
What they failed to achieve in Gaza, they are trying to make up for here in Jenin. Not only in Jenin. Jenin is the site of resistance and fighting. If they end the resistance here, they will end it in all of the West Bank.
For almost 2 months, the Palestinian Authority has been trying to reassert itself over Jenin, carrying out daily raids and setting up checkpoints. PA officials say they want to prevent fighters from Hamas and Islamic Jihad gaining the upper hand. Since the start of the war on Gaza, settler attacks in the occupied West Bank have increased. This was Monday, terrorising Palestinians. The Israeli military has intensified its raids and set up more checkpoints. The Palestinian Authority says the proliferation of barriers and roadblocks is aimed at dismembering the occupied West Bank. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
All right. So, yeah, on Tuesday, Israel launched a major invasion of Jenin refugee camp and declared Operation Iron Wall. And first of all, I'd like to say I love in the most sarcastic way possible. I love IDF operational naming conventions. They tell you exactly what they're doing, what their actual intent is. So, like,
in the most corny way possible.
In the most corny way possible. So, their first operation into the West Bank was called Operation Summer Camps, where they were literally just putting thousands of men in detention camps. And now this one's Operation Iron Wall. Like, literally, we're about to heighten and enforce apartheid.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
I noticed like the first part of that clip that really stuck with me was like they're engaged in counterinsurgency operations by bulldozing roads and infrastructure. And I'm like, in what counterinsurgency doctrine do you go in and start knocking out roads and infrastructure? Like that's not how anything works.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked about this in a while, but it might be good for like the newer listeners or people who may have forgotten. It's sweat MSO.
Yeah, it's in the West, like NATO counterinsurgency doctrine. When NATO is trying to do the exact same thing hypothetically that the IDF is trying to do, because we don't buy that. But it's the literal opposite. You need to improve roads, infrastructure, sewer, water, electricity, trash services. You need to improve all those things. You need to improve the living conditions. And their opening shot, the IDF's opening shot is to make that worse. So I would argue you're not trying to do that.
And the basic thought behind that, and the acronym SWEAT MSO is, as Travis mentioned, most of it, sewage, water, electricity,
trash,
academics, trash, medical, safety, and other. And the basic principle is that if you're an occupational force and you've got guns and you're doing patrols in an area, if those sectors of everyday life that everybody in modern society wants do not function, people are going to want to kill you. Like all the people that are like sitting on the fence, should I fight? Because like most people don't want to die violently, obviously. But you're just going to make more people decide to pick up arms.
Yeah, you don't. There's no concept, or the concept to Greg's point. The concept is not that you think you're going to convert people who are in active resistance against the occupier to stop resisting. That's not what's going to happen. The point is to keep people who are currently passive, to keep them passive, or to decrease their willingness to participate in insurgent activity. And so, yeah, you don't, writ large, you don't want to make the situation in that area worse. But they're immediately going in with bulldozers, so they're going to immediately make it worse.
Yeah, and I think it was like back in October 2023 when we first brought up this counterinsurgency doctrine, and it's like literally they're just intentionally targeting and destroying every one of the sweat MSO sectors.
Yeah.
Every hospital's done, school's done, universities gone, hitting water stations, power relay stations, it was insane.
And that's why the argument, or when the claims that this is counterinsurgency or counterterror has always rung hollow, because one, that's doctrinally not how you do that, and two, it's very obvious that what you're actually trying to do is make the area unlivable. That's what you want to do. You want to make it so people can't live there, so they leave.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
And so they weren't able, and we should begin by talking about this. They weren't able to achieve any of their stated original objectives in Gaza. Hamas is not dismantled. They did not rescue the hostages through military action. Actually, their military action led to many hostage deaths and their carpet bombing of the Gaza Strip. And now they've had to pull out.
And bio reports, Hamas is having everything I've seen, Hamas is having no issue with its recruiting efforts, refilling its ranks, and resupplying. So
we get outgoing Secretary of State Bloody Blinken, Anthony Blinken, said that last week. Hamas has reconstituted itself. They've replenished their ranks to a similar manpower, essentially, prior to October 7th. And so that's coming from the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence. So that's our own reporting that he's saying. So I guess cool. There's this media push to spin it like, well, Gaza's destroyed, so what did Hamas accomplish? And I was just like, okay, well, we think back to like similar things like Vietnam. We dropped the most insane amount of ordnance, not just on northern Vietnam, but like into Laos and Cambodia.
Yeah.
Like we devastated the entire region, and guess who remained and who was still like in power after the U.S. troops withdrew after 10 years of unjust war.
Yeah, if you broke the back of Hamas, then they would not be able to reconstitute themselves, like refill their numbers. What you did do is you went in, gave everyone there who possibly didn't have a direct reason to fight because you killed, hundreds, dozens of hundreds of their family members. Created a bunch more martyrs, and there you go. You have the same problem you had before.
Yeah, they created a whole new fun acronym: Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. So, good job, guys. Anyways, however, Israel, before shifting to West Bank, though, it seems clear.
I told you the best acronym I've heard recently, which is ADL, Apartheid Defense League. That's
instead of the
anti-defamation league. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that the ADL dismissed a Sig Heil from Elon Musk as an awkward gesture.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't read U.S. news, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, who is usually at the forefront of anything that can be seen as anti-Semitic and calling it out and writing about it, et cetera, among other things. Also, gigantically Zionist, of course. They said, "Oh no, Elon Musk's Nazi salute was fine, no issue there." So that was interesting.
Well, Zionism and Nazism historically has gone hand in hand. The Mossad has employed former Nazi war criminals to do its dirty work before. So, it's just a marriage of convenience. But anyways, what I want to talk about real quick before we actually get into what's going on in the West Bank was Trump, the ceasefire deal. So it seems very clear that he's all about deals. He doesn't trust Netanyahu. That was established during his first presidency, and I don't think he's as willing to be like made a fool of as Biden was. Trump is acutely aware and hates being publicly embarrassed and humiliated by people. So that's definitely part of that. He also wanted to deliver something.
He operates by reality television rules, right? Which is it doesn't have to be true if it appears to be true. So as long as it appears that he helped bring about a ceasefire, then that's good enough. And as long as no one does, Netanyahu doesn't do anything to make Trump look like he didn't, bring about a ceasefire. It doesn't matter if there actually is any benefit or if he actually had anything to do with it, right? It's all appearance-based showmanship, decision making.
Right. And he also makes a bunch of absurd claims. Back in November, he said the war in Ukraine will be ended by the time I get to office. And then Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov immediately said the day after, like, no, it won't be. But so he can't deliver a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war. So he went with the Gaza thing. But like, again, he is beholden to his donors, Miriam Adelson, West Bank colonizer extraordinaire. And yesterday when he was signing executive orders,
I don't think there's any. I would not find it hard to believe that the timing of the ceasefire was the last, fuck you to Biden by Netanyahu, who I'm sure was irritated about the 1-2 week delay, which was the entirety of the Biden administration's resistance to genocide. 1-2 week delay to a bomb shipment, but I'm sure that was enough.
Big boy temper tantrums.
Yeah, big boy temper tantrums. Yeah.
Anyways, Trump sometimes has candid moments, like while he was being questioned by reporters while signing the flurry of executive orders on Tuesday. Here's what we can look forward to.
Mr. President, that you can keep the ceasefire in Gaza and conclude the 3 phases of this deal.
I'm not confident. That's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident, but I think they're very weakened on the other side.
We've established that they're not, just Gaza's leveled, but yeah, no. Anyways.
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Do you plan to help rebuilding Gaza?
I might. Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, the best weather. Everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
Okay. It just seems like any sort of policy around Gaza. This is my main concern.
Well, it's almost like his son-in-law wants to turn Gaza into a real estate development, right? Which is true.
Yeah, which is true, but how?
Mm-hmm.
Like you sent in divisions of mechanized infantry into Gaza, and they had to withdraw. They couldn't keep going. They were continually being attrited. The amount of mass cows they took in the past couple of weeks is insane. Yeah. So like, what are you going to do? Send in like contractors to start building condo units when Hamas is still in power? Like what is the fucking plan here?
Yeah, you can't keep an armored bulldozer alive in Gaza. So you're not building shit against their will anyway.
Yeah. So like, and this is one of the reasons I don't think the ceasefire is going to last, because one of the reasons it's like, what is the plan for governance? You say Hamas can no longer be in power. They won.
Yeah. Who's gonna tell them they can't?
Yeah. Right? What are you gonna do? Send in troops again?
Yeah.
Because it worked out so well in the first place. So anyways, it seems confident that like Trump bartered this ceasefire deal so he could have something to show, for his presidency when he came into office, looking very powerful, starting off on a win as the anti-war candidate, which again, I contest strongly. However, it seems like the bargaining chip was, okay, you give me a ceasefire, I'll give you political cover to do whatever the F you want in the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, right? Although it doesn't seem like they needed it. They've been doing it. They were doing it, at least when did they start escalating in outside of Gaza?
Last
6 months,
summer.
6 months ago.
Yeah, last summer.
Yeah. So I'm sure the more vocal cover will help, but this is the constant argument. The Gaza, it's going to be worse in Gaza under the Republicans, and a lot of us like leftists were saying, okay, how? Like, what's are the Republicans going to completely block all international bodies from doing anything? Already happening. Are they going to give open support and defense for the Netanyahu administration? Already happening. Are they going to ship munitions every 2 weeks? Already happening. So yeah, I mean, there's probably some truth to that, but I'm curious how much. I'm curious how much Netanyahu actually thinks he needs it, because at this point, who's going to stop him?
No, I just don't think he's used to being challenged at all.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of having a big boy hissy fit. But one of the interesting thing that we're seeing right now is what we've seen throughout all colonial history. It's that a comprador local indigenous government is working as the goon squad on behalf of the occupation. And that's why we have to talk about the Palestinian Authority,
West Bank,
which our friend Heba says is neither Palestinian nor an authority. But yeah, they're just goon squads who are in a boss, roundly hated, not just in the West Bank, but by the entire diaspora throughout the world, as as an arm of the Israeli occupation. And we've seen that. And this is some of Robert Inlakesh's reporting. He's a friend of mine. He's also a co-worker at Mint Press News. He wrote this article in the Palestine Chronicle, Operation Iron Wall, How Israeli Forces and PA Collaborate Against Jenin Resistance. So days prior to the announcement, so check out the article if you want. Days prior to the announcement that a Gaza-Israel ceasefire has been reached on January 14th, Israel launched 3 drone strikes into Jenin camp, killing 6 and injuring around a dozen others. This came on the same day that the Palestinian Authority and Jenin Brigade's resistance group reached an agreement to end the 40-day-long Palestinian Authority siege on the camp. So yeah, the Palestinian Authority has had Jenin refugee camp under siege for over a month. And despite the deal between the two sides, the PA has refused to honor its side of the bargain and continued to besiege the camp and arrest anti-occupation fighters. Now, on January 1st, only 2 days after the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire, the occupation forces announced the beginning of a, quote, major operation in northern West Bank. On Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, because again, what's his fuck? Yoav Gallant is no longer part of the government.
Got fired, yeah.
Yeah. So Israel Katz is now the new defense minister. I think he was a platoon leader back in the day, so totally
in the long IDF tradition of putting super experienced people in charge of battalions and brigades and large organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like Pete Hegseth as a company level officer is now going to be in charge of the world's biggest military. But anyways, Israel Katz named the Operation Iron Wall and has vowed to implement lessons learned.
Well, he's there for the same reason Hegseth is. It's more important that he's a loyalist than that he's competent, for the job, right? So
right. Yeah. So loyalist, yeah, it's almost like fascist governments and fascists like really choose loyalty over over anything else. So he's vowed to implement the lessons learned from, quote, from the method of repeated raids in Gaza. So they're taking lessons learned from Gaza and implementing them in West Bank in terms of raiding, because their night raids were super effective in defeating Hamas. So the first primary target has been the Palestinian resistance groups like the Jenin Brigades, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. There's a PFLP in the West Bank, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They're more of a secular group. So they've deployed bulldozers, jeeps, armored personnel carriers, attack helicopters, Predator and Reaper drones, and a large sum of soldiers to wage its offensive. And again, just like we've seen, it's it's a bulldozer effort. That's literally what it is.
Yeah, and as we've also seen, those bulldozers are not very hard to kill. So it has to get to a certain level. The fighting has to get to a certain level before when the level of engagement rises to RPG strikes and stuff like that. The ghettoized terrain is not as fluid and flowing with the same level of avenues that Gaza had, but it's much bigger and it's much more open. And I don't think that works in IDF favor, especially if they decide to if they truly are going to do to the West Bank what they did to Gaza. Again, I think they're going to run into the exact same problems. It's curious they're starting with the bulldozers this time, rather than having to use the bulldozers because they knocked everything down. But, yeah.
Yeah, well, we saw last summer during their
I don't expect their mechanized operations to be any more competent than they previously have been.
Right. So I guess one point is that there are two different theaters, right? Gaza and the West Bank. Gaza, open air prison camp, but you don't have a lot of police and military checkpoints. It's not this massive surveillance state where it's hard to get weapons into. Of course, weapons come in from Jordan, weapons get smuggled in from Israel. That's why a lot of these Jenin resistance groups have like M4s, AR-15s, like Israeli weapons, as opposed to AK-47s and stuff that Hamas is getting from Egypt and places like that. So it's harder to get weapons. It's also harder to organize. Like West Bank is under such incredible surveillance that it's difficult. So like a resistance movement, I think, in the West Bank will be more challenging than it would be in Gaza. 100%.
I think so too. Again, it has to get to a certain level of disruption to where those fixed positions, those fixed security positions become a liability. Right now they're not. Right now they can control, like you said, they can control the flow of supplies, they can control the flow of men and material. However, they've been able to carry out attacks historically from Jenin. They just haven't been able to carry out, what we would call like insurgent level attacks. They've managed to carry out individual, like kind of lone operator attacks mostly from Jenin. But
yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned all these security checkpoints. It's like you were in Iraq, I was in Afghanistan.
Yeah, you do not want to be standing in one of those if you're an IDF soldier and stuff escalates. It's got to escalate further than it is now, but when it gets to that point, you're all going to get shot.
All get shot by just a suicide gunman, or they could do martyrdom operations. Like
they can. Or
if you
lose control of one area, that kind of set up those ghettoized, individual. Remember, they're fixed checkpoints. These aren't snap TCPs. These aren't mobile checkpoints. They're fixed, and they're much easier to attack. So if you lose control of one part of it, you're going to start getting people picked off on the perimeter of that, and that can spread. But it hasn't started yet. That hasn't started. So they're still very effective.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of these checkpoints are run by the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, which, I mean, if they all disappear, if something flips and they stop doing that, or it becomes politically untenable for them to participate, those checkpoints are now all not being run by anybody,
or too dangerous to participate. I mean, like most of these Palestinian Authority goons keep their face covered at all times because they don't want anybody to know that they're the actual security force that's enforcing apartheid on behalf of the Israeli occupation. So the PA officials claim that they're acting against, quote, outlaws and on behalf of the Palestinian people. It's cheap propaganda, but the reality is that the overwhelming majority of people in the West Bank are against their war crimes. Instead, the deeply unpopular, anti-democratic Palestinian Authority is largely seen as a proxy force of the Israeli occupation at this point. And they've been acting that way. The thing is, they besieged Jenin for 40 days before Israel was like, no, we're going to do it now. So the PA once upon a time had some legitimacy, but it no longer presents itself as much more than a South Lebanon army styled organization. So really an ineffective organization that basically can pull security. So It does provide employment, however, to a large portion of the West Bank population, making it more effective than a traditional occupation proxy. So there's a difficult job environment in the West Bank,
Yeah.
and people need to get paid. So it's more complicated than just a goon squad. Like, people have to live, and that's kind of like what they're riding on right now. So it sucks.
Yeah, and that helps, that helps keep the West Bank in the situation that Israel is comfortable with, right? Like the IDF are comfortable with police operations.
Mhm.
They're comfortable with occupation policing type operations. They're whatever their new raid tactics are, which I would love to see.
Lessons learned from Gaza.
Is that the shooting people in hospital beds style raid, or which one was that? But
Well, yeah, I mean,
but like they're not, because they're we saw them mostly fail at actual counterinsurgent guerrilla warfare, urban warfare in general, mechanized urban warfare specifically. They were terrible at. So if whatever organization they're co-opting can help them keep the West Bank a police action, then I think that's what they'll try to do. I don't think they're going to go. I don't think they want to go full Gaza with it, just because they've proven unable to handle zones like that or battlefields like that. That's in my 2 cents, but
yeah, obviously. It seems like also the PA is desperately trying to prove its relevancy to Israel. Like, it's or we can still be in power. We're still relevant. So they're really just being the jackboots. So with Donald Trump, now that he's taken office, he immediately rescinded Joe Biden's executive orders that sanction key Israeli settler extremists in the West Bank. And it kind of seems like the territory is like nearing a paroxysm. Like it's about to like light off. And
yeah, they're the ones that are going to kick it off, right?
the settlers,
yeah. The settlers, Israeli settlers, are the ones that are going to cause, if this turns into a full scale battlefield, they're the ones that are going to trigger it. 100% think so.
Yeah, and these Israeli
they don't care. They don't care what the government says. Their settlements are illegal by everyone's rules.
No, they were literally fighting cops en masse when the ceasefire went through.
Yeah, they rioted when the ceasefire was announced. Yeah, so
yeah, they didn't want. They were just like so bald faced. It's like, we don't want a hostage deal. We don't want our hostages back. Yeah, so these settler militias, who have not only been trained, armed, and even integrated into specialized army units like the Desert Frontier.
That's great though, because I would love a shooting fight to start between, just for this purpose, not for the damage that it would cause, but because they're going to get their asses kicked. They're worse than the IDF. They're used to pushing around Palestinian civilians who aren't allowed to fight back because the police will come in and help the settlers beat them. And so if this actually does turn into a shooting fight between Palestinian militants in the West Bank and settler militias, the settler militias are I think are in for a rude awakening in what it looks like when your enemy is actually allowed to shoot back at you.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Like, over the past years, they're definitely eyeing a war on Palestinian villages. Like, these are literally pogroms that are happening.
Yeah,
we have footage that we've seen of Palestinian villages being burned by mobs of settlers over the past few days. They're carried out with no opposition from the Palestinian Authority too. Like, Palestinian Authority is supposed to be in charge of West Bank security, but they do nothing to stop settlers.
No, these settlers will beat Western observers, so they have on camera.
Yeah,
So
I would say that, yes, Israel is now licking its wounds from seemingly extracting nothing from its 15-month genocide in Gaza. It failed to achieve any of its two primary stated goals: crushing Hamas and returning the captives by force in military hostage rescue operations. And yeah, it seems like the PA, the Palestinian Authority, was also dealt a huge blow too. And although Israel used its full military might against Gaza, it now agreed to withdraw and will have no military presence nor settlements in the territory if the ceasefire actually goes through. And so, meanwhile, this Fatah political party, Fatah-led PA, has for 2 decades following the Second Intifada rejected the use of any force against their occupier under all circumstances. So this is, again, I just wanted to drill down on this for the audience. It's like there's going to be when we say the whole area is on the verge of a paroxysm, it's like people are now realizing, obviously Palestinians knew like what the PA was and what it's become, but now it's becoming absolutely intolerable. So, uh, yeah, we don't really know how it's going to turn out. What we do know about this Operation Iron Wall, it's a massive bulldozing effort. It's just another in a long, decades-long string of these counterinsurgency operations, which are just meant to slowly displace, destroy, and ethnically cleanse any sort of Palestinian habitation. And it's not going to happen in this operation. They're not going to cleanse the West Bank during this operation, but they're going to try to keep moving the ball forward, taking more land slowly in such a manner where they can run their propaganda machine and say, hey, we're not actually ethnically cleansing the West Bank. You know, in the post-World War II era, you can't just do a genocide and like displace an indigenous people without like having challenges as a state going forward. So
I think if Gaza had gone better for them militarily, I think they would be trying, right? Because I think that what they've arrived at is, okay, we're the vast majority of states around the globe are already against us, but the UN and the UK, I mean, the US and the UK aren't gonna flip. They're gonna continue to back us no matter what we do, because we just bombed Gaza for a year straight. No one in the Western powers cares. But to your point earlier, it cost them so much, they achieved so little, that's not what's going to happen in the West Bank, or that doesn't currently look like a viable strategy to them in the West Bank. It looks like an increasingly shrinking, modular ghettos in the West Bank, which is when you look at the map at it right now, you're like, wow, the West Bank's actually pretty large, compared to Gaza. But then you look at the places the Palestinians are actually allowed to live, right? And it's all these little bubbles, surrounded by Israeli controlled territory. So they're just going to continue to try to choke and make it, increasingly unlivable.
That's what they originally proposed for Gaza, that they would have these humanitarian zones, which would effectively ghettoize the population of Gaza.
Yeah, they tried to do their first cut, putting the corridor right across the middle of it, right? They couldn't hold it, but
Yeah, I mean, so it totally failed. They were defeated by the resistance forces in Gaza. However, again, we would like to state that West Bank is an entirely more challenging area of operations for any sort of resistance actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Not completely different, but very, very, very different operating environment as far as ability to move, ability to maneuver, ability to resupply, etc.
Yeah, so I guess in the end, this Operation Iron Wall won't really achieve much beyond like bulldozing some roads, killing some resistance fighters, also killing plenty and imprisoning plenty of innocent civilians, kids. Yeah. And I think that's what we're looking at. I just did want to play.
Yeah, the day of the hostage, the day of the ceasefire, the first hostage release, right? They grabbed 30 people from the West Bank the same day, I believe.
Yeah, it was it was about like 90, right?
Yeah. This is their continued ongoing harassment campaign.
Yeah, so every time that there's a hostage deal, they'll release they'll release a bunch of imprisoned Palestinians, and then immediately the next day arrest the same number of Palestinians. So
yeah, I'm curious about their our rating, their advanced raiding tactics that they learned. Is that the raiding tactic where you practice on innocent non-suspect homes in the middle of the night, right? You just pick a random house on the map and go raid it, which they've done for years. I'm curious what these advanced raid tactics are that they learned.
Well, I don't think they're really capable of learning anything. If you read that white paper from 2006 about the Israel Hezbollah war, it's like literally they haven't updated any of their
they got worse. They were tactically worse than they were in 06 somehow. So
yeah. I just want to play this one clip from TRT World by Abby Martin, host of the Empire Files. Basically a great summation of like what we need to be talking about going forward.
No way forward except for the total liberation of Palestine. Ceasefire has been the bare minimum demand that activists and Palestinians have been calling for the last 15 months of endless slaughter. So I am not going to take away anything from Palestinians who are celebrating a cease in their massacres. But I think that we have to be realistic that Israel has never adhered to any ceasefire resolution. We know Israel has become full-blown fascist. It's a Nazi state. They will go back into Gaza as they have declared. They will continue annexing the West Bank, and they will continue on the Greater Israel Project. But the narrative has changed completely forever. The corporate media in the US they operate for and by the elites, the ruling class. And it's an arm of the state. The corporate media apparatus in the United States is a functionary of the United States government, and it's bankrolled by defense contractors. And so it is up to us to amplify Palestinian voices and to let them dictate their own reality instead of the top-down control that we've been witnessing for the last 20 years. I think that it's clear that Biden is a virulent Zionist. He sat on the ceasefire deal for months, word for word. Endless slaughter of children over the last 8 months that he has sat on his hands and allowed this to continue. He is a disgusting war criminal of the highest magnitude, and he belongs in a dungeon for the rest of his life. So I think that Trump did force Netanyahu's hand. He didn't want the diplomatic nightmare of this going on, but we have to be realistic about who Trump is. He is also a Zionist, he's very close with Netanyahu, and he has promised several sweetheart additions to this ceasefire resolution, including greenlighting annexing the West Bank, lifting sanctions on extremist settlers and Pegasus software, and it is going to be a very tough road ahead for Palestinians unless the world stands up, especially Americans, stand up and force the hand of my government to stop subsidizing this criminal state. And now the question has to be, how do we hold those crimes accountable?
I mean, I don't think they will be held accountable at all. I think the most we can hope for is just for it to end eventually. Oh, you're muted. Hang on.
I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I think at best you get, you get economic accountability, right? You get impacts to trade, impacts to things like that faced by Israel. I don't think the U.S. is going to face any, or very little, not enough to make a difference. And yeah, individual, actual, like anyone going to the Hague or having any kind of actual consequences. Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, not to disagree with what Abby Martin said. Obviously, she's a stallion, but I just don't think that part of it's going to happen. I think, the pieces that led to South Africa's collapse are completely possible. That was done without the US and the UK while they actively backed the apartheid state. So, there are historical precedents for these systems, collapsing on their own with enough economic impact has caused to them, enough pariah statehood is applied to them, where they can be collapsed, they can be defeated.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from what happens in the heart of empire. I think over the next 4 years, people are going to realize that doing things like changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America is not going to lower grocery prices, and things are going to get worse and more expensive and more unlivable. I mean, we look at Trump's new tax plan. It literally raises taxes for everybody that makes less than $400,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, sometimes
I wonder,
sometimes it's got to get worse before it gets worse before it gets better. So
yeah, gonna get worse before it gets worse before it gets better. And I'm hoping that that's where it comes from. There's this obsession on the right with not sending foreign aid to countries, but I guess Israel gets an exception. And I'm not talking about all the people on the right. There's a lot of
I also saw great memes that it's January 21st, time for all the Democrats to be against U.S. support of Israel. Now that the Democrats aren't doing it, all the fair weather activists can come back out and attack the Republican administration for doing it. They turned a blind eye. So now it's their turn to join in. But
yeah,
get pretty cynical, but I don't think it's inaccurate, right? I mean, plenty of people held their nose, ignored it, and supported the Biden administration.
Yeah, and I don't really want to go on a tangent, but yes, when I came out being virulently anti Kamala Harris,
yeah, I caught a lot of crap.
I caught so much fucking flack from liberals.
Yeah.
But anyways, I do want to talk about the fact that there's plenty of conservative people on the right, like the libertarians, the constitutionalists.
You and I both know people that we don't agree with as far as domestic politics goes, who are totally against Israel and sending any kind of financial or weapons aid to them.
Yeah, I just wish they'd connect this all to capitalism.
Yeah, they haven't put the dots together yet, but yeah, they're so close,
so close. Like Luigi almost got everybody there.
Yeah,
but the people pulled back, and they still think like, you shouldn't get free healthcare because nobody, you don't have a right to anybody's labor. It's like
right. You can get them to say things like, yeah, corporations shouldn't get subsidies either, but it's like, now just connect it all together, man. Put it all together. You're almost there, but yeah.
Anything to not learn like class consciousness, and it's also not just like class consciousness in America. It's like all throughout the world. Like,
no, I mean, 100%. We're seeing neoliberal governments, center left, whatever the, pretend left, center moderate, center right governments lose to right wing populists in the U.S., in Europe, all over the place. So
yeah. I mean, people are kind of.
It's not original thought. Jacobin put out an article about this. How that's not just happening in the U.S. This is happening all over the place.
No, because the entire capitalist system is decaying. Like coming back to the Trump administration, you're in a room with the top 1%, who have monopolized and owned 40% of the wealth that exists in America, and their wealth keeps growing and growing and growing, and within a closed system, that's called cancer, bro.
That's true.
Yeah. So, I definitely wanted to do an episode on this, new iteration of Israeli military operations, but one of the reasons we haven't done an operational breakdown in so long is because they're not doing anything new.
No, yeah, they were running. They ran the same playbook for the most of the last 5 months at least, and their ground operations continued to be tragic. Their adventure into southern Lebanon, went so poorly that they stopped doing it. Right, they ended that as quickly as they could. Yeah. So it'd be, like I said, West Bank operationally, this is what they're comfortable with. They're comfortable with apartheid police action. That they're good at that.
Stealing a 9-year-old girl's bicycle and throwing it in the
dumpster. At a checkpoint, throwing it in the bushes. Yeah. Greg's referencing one of the initial videos that sent me off the edge about them because the little girl's similar age to mine. They take some little girl's bike away and chuck it in the bushes, and I was like, what in the fuck am I watching? Who are these people?
It's like, bro, you're in uniform. Like, have some dignity. Like, oh, geez. Well, next 4 years, I think it's all going to come down, hopefully, but like when we descend into chaos, I still want to be at least middle-aged, so I'd be old enough to still be able to shred butts. Still be old enough to be able to shred butts during a post-apocalyptic situation.
Greg, you're never too old to die for the gods. So
yeah. Well, any last thoughts? I keep trying to think about this operational iron wall. First of all,
I think like you said, it's obviously a powder keg, and who's going to light the match, right? I mean, my bet is on Israeli settlers are gonna kick it off, but
yeah. I mean, okay, so that's definitely something to look forward to. You know what I think might happen though in the end? It's that when Netanyahu's he's like the Houdini of politics. Right. Every time you think he's screwed, he worms his way out of the trap. But eventually it's not he's either going to die of prostate cancer, or finally get charged for corruption, or convicted for corruption. But before that, I think they might, and once he's gone, because Ben-Gvir has already left the government, and Smotrich was thinking about leaving the government after the ceasefire deal, but I think he's happy with this new annexation effort in the West Bank, so he's going to stick around and kind of hold Netanyahu's coalition together within the Knesset. But when he's gone, I think after the full horror of the genocide in Gaza, they're going to try to reframe themselves as a more moderate liberal government. Perhaps. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting too, because there also arguably should be a steady stream of data and reporting about, the genocide coming out in the next year, right? Now that the media should get full access to Gaza again, and they start digging, they start recording, you would assume there's going to be a shitload of data coming out of Gaza that if our media ever did its effing job, should be almost like a daily drumbeat of genocide documentation. Will that happen? No, not on the U.S. side anyway. But have you seen anything like that? That's what I've been waiting for.
They're not currently. Last I heard,
are they letting journalists in yet?
No.
Yeah,
I don't think they will. This was the Davos summit just happened, and this is Israel's economy minister being interviewed on CNBC by a journalist about like the war in Gaza. They're so desperate to not have what happened get out because they know what happened. They just don't know. Yeah. So like listen to the desperation in this guy's voice when he's even challenged.
Civil casualties in Lebanon.
So this is Israel's economy minister on the Gaza war.
Than we had in Gaza, and the reason is that we don't want to hurt innocent people. However,
Minister,
when they hide behind the civilians,
Minister,
we're telling bear with me 1 second, okay?
Minister, you know.
Bear with me a second.
Minister. I mean, you have to explain that comment a little bit further. That is outrageous to say. Tens of thousands of innocent people have died as a result of Israel's war in Gaza. You know that.
We've told them to shy away from the terrorists. And with all due respect, look at every proportion, every ratio in the world.
How do you
in
think
wars,
history
one of the best ratios of
war? How do you think history will remember this war, given the amount of civilian casualties?
What are you talking about? You know how many civilians were killed in the Second World War all over the region?
Oh, yeah. Nothing I love more than history, bros. Like justifying every atrocity in the modern era with World War II.
Yeah, going back to World War fucking II, comparing that to one country's fight in one area, Gaza. Like, oh, wow. That's incredible.
With all due respect, that's...
But like, listen to the desperation in his voice.
It's unfair.
Yeah. And under this
look
government...
at the numbers. Look at the real numbers. The real numbers should demonstrate that relative to any other war...
We don't have real numbers, dude. You have a fucking gag order on everything.
That any Western world had in civil ecosystems like we had, it's the smallest ratio of casualties relative to terrorists.
I mean,
nobody had such a...
That's so comically false. Of course, one of the like ways you get into Israeli politics must be the ability. They must give you a test on your ability to say shit like this on the news with a straight face, because holy crap, it's incredible. Because you compare, even comparing that directly to the most recent, like Iraq and Afghanistan, it's not even remotely true. But yeah,
we weren't even able to drone strike like literally dudes who were attached to foreign terrorist organizations if they were on a road. Because we
talked about this in the height, the height of the U.S. counterinsurgency in Baghdad. Zero JDAMs were dropped on the city of Baghdad, right? And definitely not on Twitter. I mean, they strike like they conducted strikes, direct fire strikes with Apaches, Hellfire missiles, stuff like that. But you didn't see 500-pound bombs dropped anywhere near civilian structures. So they're compared to be on the news and say that's fucking nuts. It's wild. That's they tell a lot of big lies on the news, but that's one of the biggest ones I've seen come out of one of their mouths in a minute.
I've only personally seen 3 JDAMs dropped.
Yeah,
and that's because we were like hitting these compounds, and they turned out to be landslides, which is basically like an H-bit, a house-born, basically just giant booby trap, and nobody was inside it. And it's like, okay, we probably shouldn't have a 2,000 pounds of explosives just laying around. So we'd drop a JDAM on it, and they would,
those are
the only times I've seen a JDAM dropped.
In 07, in 07, like, so not only was aerial bombing completely out of the question for any kind of targeting, the artillery units, just for comparison, and JDAM, the smallest JDAM is like a 500-pound bomb.
Yeah.
an HE artillery shell from like a NATO unit is 93 pounds. You couldn't even shoot HE artillery in the city. They would shoot it in the open areas on the outside of the city only, and in the city they'd only fire like aluminum and smoke rounds, because the yield on those shells was even too high to use. They were too worried about collateral killing and destruction. So yeah, that's fucking wild for him to say that.
Yeah, and again, we're not apologizing for U.S.
Yeah, no, by no
means. But like a couple times, like I was watching that, I'd be like, they're so bad. Are we good? No, we're not.
No,
but
we're still not good. But
like
there's a lot of degrees of bad, and holy shit, there's a lot between the two. Yeah, there's a lot big separation between NATO and IDF as far as that kind of conduct. But yeah.
And also, like, I never found the time to like put on women's lingerie while I was conducting combat operations.
No, I never opened. Yeah, never opened anyone's anything. So weird, really fucking weird.
Yeah. So look, this new operation in West Bank with the Comprador Goon Squad that is the Palestinian Authority, it's going to be more of the same. We've talked about Vietnam a lot. Vietnam backlash, 10 years of like some of the most insane direct action protesting from within the Imperial Corps, within the United States.
Right.
10 years. We're at 15 months. So
yeah, I remember you brought this up before when people kind of expressed like how long.
I'm exhausted. How long do we have
to protest this before something will change? And it's like the historical precedent says a long fucking time. So yeah,
a long fucking time. And also historical precedent. If you look at the backlash to the Iraq War, didn't end. No amount of protest.
Oh no, yeah, did nothing.
Yeah, well, people were also more radical back in the 60s.
Also the tools weren't there. The tools weren't as good. The only people who could film, the only people filming protests, because people weren't walking around with phones in their pocket. I mean, with cameras in their pocket like they are now. And so for the Iraq War protests, the only people filming them were news outlets who then wouldn't run the stories. I can tell you straight up, when I was in Iraq, I knew almost nothing about the anti-war protests going on in the U.S.
They were huge, and we don't remember that.
Yeah, 07 and 09, that did not make our radar. And I was an Army officer at the time, did not make our radar. The only one that I remember was Cindy Sheehan. She was the only one who I saw, because remember she was outside like the Bush Ranch for like a year, and that that was the only thing that hit my radar at the time. Like any kind of I've seen all these marches now after the fact, guys throwing their medals. What's her name's husband?
Mike Preisner.
Mike Preisner. Yeah, I did not see Mike Preisner stuff when I was in that war. It did not, because it was on the news. They would censor and hide that stuff.
Yeah, he was also kicked. He was also.
I've seen Mike Preisner videos, in the last 2 years. I did not see them before. So
yeah, basically, in the end, more of the same. When things get worse, and when people start realizing, more Americans start realizing that,
Oh, sorry, but soldiers now absolutely see this stuff, right? Soldiers now are on TikTok, around the world, or well, not TikTok, but whatever they're on right now. Actually, I guess they're back on TikTok, but and someone posts directly from Palestine, they do see it. So it's completely different. When there's protests in Austin and Chicago and New York and DC, they do see it. That's the difference. They all know about the self-immolation. They all know about a lot of them probably saw you get dragged out of a hearing. They see this stuff. Like I said, unlike OIF and OEF, where we weren't seeing most of these protests and resistance stuff, they do see it. So that part is completely different. If anything accelerates it, the visibility is much, much higher.
And in the meantime, we generally like to end with a call to action. So if you have a bunch of conservative friends, try to teach them about class consciousness. This is not a left versus right issue. This is a top versus down issue. And if you have liberal friends who are still right wing, in my opinion, just because we're like dirty radical leftists, try to convince them that to get off their ass and nobody's going to save them. The government's not, and the Democratic Party sure as shit isn't, to actually get involved and get active and do radical things like, I don't know, read some theory or join an organization or something like that. So that's where we're going to go. Trump administration is going to be a wild 4 years, but we'll still be around doing our thing, talking about this stuff, and, you know, maybe getting arrested from time to time. Like, God,
go to a DSA meeting. It's totally innocuous. That's a good place to start too. So
yeah. And you know, I think like a radical Marxist Leninist like Alina will be like, DSA is like blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, at least people are starting to learn about socialism. Like, chill.
Yeah, hey, that's where I started, and look where we are now. So
Yeah,
you know,
now we're just black flag anarchists.
we're black flag anarchists. So yeah,
DSA is a gateway drug too.
It is a gateway drug.
So, anyways, y'all, do that. This is not ending anytime soon. Maybe when we're like 80 or 90.
Marathon.
Yeah, marathon. The next 50 years are going to be stupid as fuck, but we'll be here, and we'll see you next time. This has been Operational Breakdown, and yeah, see you Friday, tomorrow, for our Patreon episode, and we are on Patreon, so check that out. All right, cheers.